Etching looks mysterious because the artist does not simply draw on paper and stop there. The real image is built inside a metal plate, using a controlled chemical reaction. In traditional etching, a plate of copper, zinc, or steel is covered with a protective waxy ground. The artist scratches through that ground where lines should appear, exposing bare metal underneath. Then acid, also called a mordant, bites into only those exposed areas. What begins as a delicate scratch becomes an incised groove. Later, that groove holds ink, and under pressure, the ink moves onto paper. So etching is not just drawing, and not just chemistry. It is a collaboration between hand, metal, acid, ink, paper, and a printing press. The key idea behind etching is intaglio printing. In intaglio, the printable image sits below the surface, inside cut or bitten lines. This is the opposite of a stamp, where raised areas carry the ink. With etching, the smooth top of the plate is wiped mostly clean, while ink remains trapped inside the recessed marks. When damp paper is pressed hard against the plate, it is forced into those tiny channels and pulls the ink out. That is why etched lines often have a special depth and presence. They are not merely marks sitting on a surface. They are impressions transferred from grooves that were physically made in metal. Before any acid is used, the plate must be prepared. The metal surface is covered with a ground, usually a waxy material that resists acid. This ground acts like a shield. Wherever it stays intact, the acid cannot reach the metal. Wherever it is removed, the metal becomes vulnerable. This simple protective layer gives the artist precise control over a dangerous process. Instead of letting acid attack the entire plate, the artist decides exactly where the bite should happen. The ground also changes how drawing feels. The artist is not cutting deeply into metal at this stage, but only opening paths through the protective coating. The drawing is made with a pointed etching needle, which scratches away the ground and exposes the plate beneath. Because the needle only has to remove the coating, it can move with much more freedom than a tool that must carve the metal directly. This gives etching a lively, sketch-like quality. Lines can feel quick, nervous, flowing, or delicate. Another tool, the chop, has a slanted oval shape and can make swelling lines that vary in width. These tools allow the artist to plan not only where the lines go, but what character they will have. Every scratch is a future groove waiting for the acid to bite. Once the drawing is complete, the plate is placed in acid or has acid washed across it. This acid is traditionally called the mordant, from the French idea of biting. That word is accurate, because the acid does not merely stain the plate, it cuts into the exposed metal through a chemical reaction. The depth of each line depends on how strong the acid is and how long the metal is exposed. A brief bite creates a shallow mark that may print lightly. A longer bite creates a deeper channel that can hold more ink and print more strongly. In etching, time becomes part of the drawing toolset. This control over depth is one reason etching can produce such varied images. If every exposed line were bitten for the same length of time, the print might look flat or uniform. But an artist can protect some areas again, then let other areas remain in the acid longer. This means certain lines can stay pale and fine while others become dark and forceful. Shadows, textures, and emphasis can be built through repeated decisions. The plate can also be reworked after a first proof print. The artist may add new ground, scratch more lines, deepen weak passages, or repair areas. A finished etching can therefore pass through several states. After the acid has done its work, the remaining ground is removed, and the plate reveals its incised design. But it still cannot print until it is inked correctly. Ink is spread across the whole plate so it enters every etched line and groove. Then the surface is wiped clean, leaving ink mainly inside the recessed areas. This wiping stage requires judgment. If the printer wipes too aggressively, shallow lines may lose ink and disappear. If too much ink stays on the surface, the print may become muddy or atmospheric in a way that may or may not be intended. The final image depends not only on the plate, but also on the hand that inks and wipes it. Printing the image requires a high-pressure press. The inked plate is paired with a sheet of paper, often moistened so the fibers soften and can reach into the etched grooves. As plate and paper pass through the press, pressure forces the paper against the metal and into the ink-filled incisions. When the paper is lifted, the image appears. It is usually reversed from the original plate, because the plate transfers the design like a mirror. This moment is the final translation of the process. A scratched ground became exposed metal became bitten grooves, grooves held ink, and pressure turned that ink into a print. Etching became historically important because it allowed images to be repeated. A single plate could produce many impressions before showing serious wear, often several hundred under typical conditions. This made it possible for an artist's image to travel beyond one unique drawing or painting. Yet every print was not necessarily identical in feeling. Ink thickness, wiping style, paper dampness, and press pressure could all affect the result. Etching therefore sits between reproduction and craft. The plate provides a repeatable matrix, but the printing process still leaves room for touch, variation, and interpretation. Each impression is part copy, part performance. Etching is often discussed beside engraving because both are major intaglio techniques, but they work differently. Engraving cuts lines directly into metal with a sharp tool, demanding physical control and pressure. Etching lets acid cut the metal after the artist has drawn through a ground. That difference matters. Engraving can produce crisp, deliberate lines, while etching can preserve the spontaneity of drawing. Artists have often combined the two when they wanted both freedom and precision. Rembrandt, for example, is strongly associated with etched prints that use line, tone, and reworking to create dramatic atmosphere rather than merely clean outlines. Etching can also be combined with aquatint, a related intaglio process used to create tonal areas rather than only lines. This combination became especially powerful for artists who wanted shadow, mood, and broad fields of darkness. Francisco Goya is one of the famous names connected with such printmaking combinations. The important point is that etching is not limited to a single visual style. It can be spare and linear, dense and atmospheric, delicate, harsh, controlled, or experimental. Because the plate can be bitten, inked, wiped, printed, and reworked, it gives artists a flexible system for building images in layers. The French term eau forte, meaning strong water, captures the old fascination with the process. A liquid powerful enough to damage metal becomes, under control, a tool for making art. That control is never automatic. The artist must protect the plate, expose the right lines, judge the acid, clean the ground, ink the grooves, wipe the surface, and print with enough pressure. A mistake at any stage can change the final image. But that is exactly what makes etching compelling. It turns risk into precision. The image is not simply placed on the page, it is bitten into existence, then pulled from metal into paper. Etching did not remain only an old master printmaking technique. Its basic principle appears in modern technology as well: protect certain areas, expose others, and remove material with controlled precision. In modern manufacturing, different chemicals may be used, and the materials may go far beyond traditional copper or zinc plates. Processes related to etching are important in photochemical milling, circuit boards, and microfabrication. The scale can shrink from a visible line in a print to tiny structures in electronics, but the logic remains familiar. Etching is selective subtraction. Whether used for an artwork or a technological component, it creates form by deciding exactly where material should disappear. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.